4,369,295. That is how many words make up Robert Jordan's fantasy epic, The Wheel of Time. I now have read 310,426 of those words. Those words making up the first book out of 15 in the series, The Eye of the World. Welcome to the channel. My name is Beck, and I read and review fantasy and sci-fi books. This is actually my first review on the channel, and it's a book that I very much enjoyed, more so than I thought I would, especially because people say that it's often pretty difficult to get into the Wheel of Time, but I had no problem with it. The first thing I'm going to attack is a common criticism of the Wheel of Time, and that is that it's a Tolkien clone, especially this first book, The Eye of the World. I can understand where people come from with this. They have similar vibes. Both of the main characters come from small towns that are kind of isolated from the rest of the world. A magical figure shows up, and all of a sudden they have to go on this quest to save the world and defeat the Dark One. There's kind of a Dark One. There's definitely a Dark One in the Wheel of Time, and there is Sauron, obviously, in Lord of the Rings. There are other similarities between the series too, like the Myrddraal and the Nazgul are pretty similar. The Trollocs and the Orcs are pretty similar too. Both bad guys and monsters that the main characters face. I don't think that this criticism is as big of a deal as people make it out to be. It's really only formulaic and like Fellowship of the Ring at the very beginning, and then once the characters, spoiler alert, the characters split off at some point. Once you get to there, and you're experiencing all these different types of cultures from different perspectives and different POVs, you get past that, and you get into really what the meat of the Wheel of Time, so far at least for me, has been, which is, it's just an amazingly and super intricately built world where every culture is fully realized, and I'll be getting into that a little bit later when I go over the pros. But yeah, that's just the first con that I want to address. The second con that I want to address is the repetitive writing, and this is something that I can't really defend naturally just by writing a really long book, and it being his first book in the series. He repeats some phrases sometimes, especially descriptions. I mean, this is just perfect segue into the next thing. The amount of times you hear people described as strikingly beautiful or tall and handsome, it's just, it really kind of, it gets on your nerves when you're reading it over and over and over again, and it's describing just so many people. And I've already started the second book, and it does not change at all. This is something that continues throughout so far the series for me, which is 1.5 books. The biggest problem I have with the Wheel of Time so far, and which meaning the Eye of the World book, is the female characters. They have been close to insufferable so far. I made a joke to my friend who read the series where every single woman character is either annoying or wants to sleep with Rand, and there's a fair share of them that are both, that fall under both of those categories. Yeah, I don't think that there's a single character that is the core group's age, so late teens, that does not want to get with Rand the second that they see him. And that is really frustrating, especially because Jordan he hasn't been writing romance very well, I've noticed. I don't like Egwene and Rand's relationship. I find her very annoying. She just complains a lot without offering a lot of solutions, which Teddy Roosevelt's called that whining. It's really hard to read. Nynaeve is so unnecessarily difficult, as is Moiraine, which is my final kind of criticism about the first book, is the female characters are very important in the world, and they don't really help the characters. I know that that's part of the story, kind of, is that they're not helping the characters, are being very vague with what the goals and motivations and what the end goal of the characters are. But it makes it really hard to read when you don't really know what the end goal of the book is. And I think that the ending of The Eye of the World is phenomenal. It was great. It was a great final scene, spoiler fight thing. That was very good. But all of the parts leading up to that, you don't really know what's going on. You don't really know where it's going. There's unclear motives, unclear goals, and that's a little frustrating. Having said all that, I would like to get into the pros of The Eye of the World. The first one being the most general one, it's just epic. Everything about the Wheel of Time is epic. The character names are so long you can't pronounce them. There's a ton of character names, and that just adds to the charm of what classic fantasy really is. And there are moments that make you just want to stand up and cheer when there's swords, there's monsters, there's fighting, you're blasting things. It's just everything you want to get out of epic fantasy is right in this book. The second big pro I would like to touch on, and what I think is the most impressive thing about The Eye of the World, is the culture and world building that is established in just the first book. The only thing that I can really compare it to, I guess, the only thing that's even close to it, is what the Stormlight Archive manages to achieve in its world and culture building in 5 books, which really just says a lot about The Eye of the World. Sure, at some points it gets a little dense when you're just receiving so much exposition and so much backstory, but this world is so rich. Even before the point where this story picks up, the world has such a deep history where you have multiple ages that have happened before. He could write an entire series about the Age of Legends, and obviously he can't anymore, but an entire series could have been written about the Age of Legends, and that would have been almost as awesome as the Wheel of Time. Every single group of people that the characters come across, and I won't get into spoilers right now, they're all so different and have such rich cultures that it's really, really impressive. And without getting into spoilers, obviously I can't get into more, but that'll be coming up in the next section here. And then my final point that I'm going to make is his prose it's elite. His prose is elite. It gets boggy sometimes, and like I've said, there's some repetition of words, but just painting scenes in your mind, there's nobody who does it better other than maybe Tolkien, which I guess could be another thing that people complain about and whine about when they're insulting The Eye of the World. Okay, now for the spoilers part. I'm just going to kind of do big, broad strokes about what I thought about the story and the different characters that were in the story. So, The Wheel of Time begins on in a small village called Emond's Field, where you are immediately introduced to the core characters, being Rand, Perrin, Mat, Nynaeve, Egwene, Moiraine, Lan, and Tom. And those characters stick with you through the entire book. Essentially what happens is Moiraine, who is an Aes Sedai, so a powerful sorceress, she notices that the 3 kids are the 3 kids she's been looking for a certain amount of time. It's the whole chosen one thing. The 3 boys, Rand, Perrin, and Mat. And then this evil group of people called the Trollocs, which are a hybrid of man and animals. They attack the village and they kill a bunch of people, and Moiraine essentially tells the core group, hey, you guys got to get out of here or everybody you love is going to die. And Egwene and Nynaeve, or not actually Nynaeve, Egwene decides to tag along and they leave the town. All this traveling, and they arrive at this place called Shadar Logoth. Now, something happens at Shadar Logoth. They're attacked, and they have to split up into 3 groups. Mat and Rand, Perrin and Egwene, and then Moiraine and Lan. And then Nynaeve eventually joins Moiraine and Lan. Now, I'm just going to kind of go over, I'm not going to go into the details of the plot, but I'm going to go over what I think about each of these arcs and what each of the characters do on their own before they are reunited at the end. So I'm going to start with Mat and Rand. Now, this was an interesting part for me. I didn't particularly enjoy this part as much. I did enjoy it. But this was where the whole thing with Rand and all of the women wanting to sleep with him was very rampant, especially one part when they stay at this farmer's house and the daughter is just so down bad for Rand that the farmer essentially kicks him out. Yeah, so they're just on a really long journey. They want to get to a city where Moraine said that they meet up with them. Uh, and the interesting part about this whole thing that's going on is Mat isn't right. He picked up this dagger in Shadar Logoth, and he is growing increasingly more suspicious of everyone. He's looking more sick. He's not leaving his room, and that is just a really interesting. It's really interesting to see how Rand and Mat handle their relationship when Mat is like this, because honestly, you don't really see many great moments between Mat and Rand at this point in the book, or at this point in the series. Like, they're supposed to be best friends, but they just seem to be fighting the whole time. This continues too. What I'm noticing in the second book, they're just fighting the whole time. But yeah, that's essentially the meat of what's going on. They're just going from town to town. They're finding dark friends, so people who serve Dark One. They're finding them everywhere. And yeah, that's kind of the meat of the story. I didn't enjoy this part as much as I enjoyed Perrin and Egwene. I really liked Perrin's arc. His denial, and this is something that happens with pretty much all of the characters, is their denial to accept the changes that are happening. Like, the whole time that's going on, you hear the characters talking about, wow, it'll be so great when we get back to Emond's Field, and won't this be such a good story when we get back to Emond's Field? So Perrin discovers that he has this supernatural ability to talk to wolves, and it's changing how he's thinking. The wolves are in his head, he's in the wolf's head, he's picking up more animalistic instincts the entire time, and and he just hates it. He hates everything that's going on with it, and he wants it to stop. And he just wants things to return the way that they are before. And you see this just huge change in Perrin, where it's commented on several times that he won't meet people in the eye. His eyes are yellow now, actually, and his eyes are downcast the entire time. And I just really thought that Perrin and Egwene's relationship was actually better than Rand and Egwene's relationship. It was really wholesome at some points. Egwene kind of uses Perrin as a crutch, and the cultures that they discover when they're out journeying on their own, like the Tinkerers, are just so interesting. Where you get it's the leaf principle, or that's not the correct words. I apologize, but the whole philosophy about not using violence to solve your problems, and Perrin battling with himself in his mind. It's like, I don't want to carry this axe. And he says this at some point, where his hands are built for the blacksmith hammer, not for carrying the axe. But he is a wolf brother, and he has to accept that, and he has to grow and use those powers, even though he really doesn't want to. But he has to use those powers at multiple points in the book to save them. And that's another thing with Rand, as Rand is drawing on the one power later, and he hates it. He hates drawing on the one power, but he just has to use it to get out of trouble. So it's just really interesting where all of the characters, they're being given these really powerful supernatural abilities, and they hate them, all of them, and they just want to go back to Emond's Field. One thing that I really enjoyed about the contrast between Egwene and Perrin and Mat and Rand was every single time that they would come across a girl, Rand would be like, if only Perrin were here. Perrin really knows how to talk to women. And then Rand would get approached by a woman and he'd be like, oh man, I can't talk to girls. Rand is so good at talking to girls. And this happens so much between the two books, where they're just commenting on how the other knows how to talk to girls, and that's a really funny and frankly relatable thing. One thing that I want to touch on very quickly before I go to Moraine and Land and Nynaeve's part of the story is how brilliantly Robert Jordan foreshadows in this novel. You see, so Rand has the ability to channel, so to draw from the one power, and you see this hinted at earlier in the book, when at some point he makes Bella, his horse, go faster and regain her stamina. And at another point, he's swinging around and doing acrobatics on a ship that he's on, and he was drawing from the one power, but he doesn't realize it. Nynaeve, Lan, and Moraine's part is the part of the story that I enjoyed the least, I would like to say. I think it's really funny how Nynaeve like hates Moraine, and Moraine's like, nope, you're gonna go with me and you're gonna learn how to be an Aes Sedai because you can channel. And Nynaeve is like, no, I can't. Yeah, which is just true to who Nynaeve is and who all the characters are. They're all just so stubborn and unwilling to accept that the world is anything differently than they thought it was. Uh, yeah, there's not much that I want to comment on this part other than that I really did. I didn't enjoy this part as much, but the part at which I think the book gets really good is when the main characters get to Caemlyn and you're introduced to characters like Elaine and my favorite character so far, Loial, who's just awesome. He's an Ogier, which just wildly intelligent, loves to read, and he's got all these different powers that kind of unveil themselves and become more useful and useful later on in the book. The characters do reunite, and they figured out that they need to go to the Eye of the World, which is, wow, that's a name drop. It's the Eye of the World. And they go there. They have to go through these way paths that Loial has to help him with because he's the only one that can navigate in that space. They show up in this place called the Blight, which is super freaky. It's like everything's still around you and everything's dead. And they comment that the trees would reach out and grab you if they could. And then they find the Eye of the World in this green man, and then two of the Forsaken, which are some really powerful baddies in the series. They show up, and there's this big fight, and you see Rand's first big use of the One Power, which he teleports himself away, I think that's pretty much what happens. He teleports himself away, and he fights, and he kills all of these Trollocs in this battle that's going on near him. And then he also kills one of the Forsaken after that. And that's the big first thing of Rand kind of stepping into his power. And he still hates to use it at this point. But this is the first time where you kind of see Rand that he is the person that Moiraine was looking for at the start. So overall, to summarize essentially everything I've said so far, the pros of the Wheel of Time are that it is very well written. I think that most of the characters are really engaging and very interesting at this point in the series, and the world building is on another level, and the action is everything that you need from a fantasy series. The cons, I would say, at this point are the women characters, I think, are pretty weak across the board. I just think that they're really annoying, which I know is something that is commented on a lot, and Jordan was trying to make them annoying. It still doesn't enhance the experience. It's still frustrating to read Moiraine not help anybody at all, unless it benefits her. And yeah, that's frustrating. And then I didn't find some of the characters or some of the parts as interesting as others, which is more of a me problem. Like, I would prefer to read about the super cool guys who have swords and stuff over, I'm a guy. I don't know. It's my fault. But overall, I think I'd give the Eye of the World probably 7.6 stars. Yeah, I really did enjoy it. I don't understand how people have a hard time getting into the Wheel of Time, because despite all of its flaws, like, this is right up my alley. Like I said earlier, I watch and read One Piece. Like, the world building is everything to me. And I know that these characters are just going to get more and more powerful, and they're going to be more and more developed characters, which I really appreciate. I'm excited to see where all the characters go, which is a good thing. Obviously, if you're not engaged in the characters, you shouldn't be reading the series. And I really enjoyed that first book in the series. And like I said, I've already started Great Hunt, and I'm enjoying that one even more. So stay tuned, because I will probably be posting reviews on that one too. and probably some other things along the way, maybe some shorter random miscellaneous videos. But yeah,